Hello, this is David Panush of the Edmund Burke School. This is a video lecture for Chapter 9, Immune to Reality in the section Rationalization from the book Stumbling on Happiness by Dan Gilbert. So in this chapter, Gilbert continues his discussion about the psychological immune system, the PIS. And the main point of this chapter is that in order for the PIS to work, we are, and sort of have to be, unaware of it, and it works at a subconscious level. That is, if we knew about it, it wouldn't work as well, because in order to believe your own rationalizations and self-deceptions, you can't know that you're lying to yourself. Then the lie sort of doesn't really work, or exaggerating or manipulating or any of those sorts of things. So the last chapter we talked about all the ways that our brain can kind of cook the facts and minimize or maximize or exaggerate. Well, if you know you're doing it, it doesn't work as well. You can't lie to yourself unless you actually believe the lie as well. So remember that the PIS is always trying to balance illusion and reality. And if the illusion becomes too great, then we can't really work with it. We use reality and we keep a little balance, then we can kind of swallow it. And over and over again in the chapter, Gilbert explains, because we're unaware of the PIS, because it is a self-deception, because it does work at the level of the subconscious, we mispredict how we're going to feel in the future, because we don't realize that we're going to do all these great rationalizations to make things better. So several examples. So when we talk about individual versus group rejection, the PIS can much better handle individual rejection rather than group rejection. And again, and over again I'll explain, most people predict it would be the opposite. So you go before one person and judges you and rejects you, you can come up with rationalizations about that person. You can manipulate reality enough to explain that it's their fault and not yours. But if there are 4 or 5 judges all giving you a 0, all rejecting you, it's much more difficult to balance the illusion of trying to feel good about yourself versus the reality of 4 different judges all kind of giving you the rejection. Similarly, most people would predict that it would feel better to experience bad luck than human negligence. And in fact, it's the opposite. So if somebody is responsible for something bad that happens to you, you can blame them. You can explain it away. You can rationalize it. You can come up with a reason why it's their fault, really not yours. But if it's bad luck, you can't make much of a rationalization about it. There's nobody to blame except, the powers that be, fate, God, or whatever. And that is a lot more difficult to come up with plausible explanations. You say, why me? Why me hurts? But if you can say, well, oh, it's because of that guy, then you can feel better about it. So those were the droids you're looking for. The stormtrooper regrets not having stopped Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker to get the droids. So this illustrates the idea that inactions are actually more a cause of regret than actions. So in other words, given an opportunity to do something or not do something, most people think, ooh, I don't want to do it because I might regret it. When in fact, you're much more likely to regret something you have not done than something you have done. And because I hope you're getting a theme here, something you've done can be explained. Once you have an experience, remember, you own it. It's yours. So anything you associate with yourself, you try and make positive as much as you can. You try to see the bright side, put a silver lining on it. But if you never had the experience at all, then you've kind of got nothing to hook your rationalizations into. So here are our illustration. She has a boo-boo and she makes a sad face. Well, what this kind of illustrates is that small things, small negative experiences, are actually not something that generally triggers your psychological immune system. If something small, whereas larger things make it kick in. So again, this is a little different than the other ones, and the term for this is called affective forecasting, and this is actually where Daniel Gilbert has made his name in the field of psychology. This idea that we can't predict how we're going to feel in the future, and one of the things that we can't predict is how small things actually bother us for longer and more intensely than we think they would, and bigger things bother us for less amount of time and less intensely than we think they would. So affect is emotion and forecasting is predicting. And this is one of those ways in which we get it wrong. So basically, only when something is really above a certain level of intensity, and it would be different for different folks, does the PIS try to kick in and rationalize it and come up with an explanation for it. So an example from the book is an experiment where people were initiated into a club, and you had to receive a set of shocks to get in. Those who received more mild shocks did not like the club and did not see the experience of getting into the club as positively as those who received more intense shocks. And you would probably predict it would be the opposite. The people who got the bigger shocks would be pissed off and angry and wouldn't, want to be in. But it turns out it's the opposite, because it's sort of the intensity trigger of receiving the bigger shocks made people rationalize it and think, well, this must really be worth it. And it is worth it, and it's important for me to go through all this pain to get in, then it's a valuable club. Whereas something with the smaller shocks, I could take it or leave it. I don't know if it's such a big deal. And maybe some of you have experienced this in your own experiences with maybe, something really difficult. Actually, in the long run, you feel much better about having done than something that really wasn't that hard to begin with. And mostly, on your sports teams, for instance, you might feel that people who suffer through the training together are much more dedicated and positive than people who, maybe it just comes easy to them or something like that. Another way of looking at the way the PIS works is, brief pause, the inescapability trigger. And again, it's a little bit counterintuitive. Something that you can get out of doesn't force you to rationalize it, doesn't force you to think about how to make it, find that silver lining, or look on the bright side, but something you're stuck with, either an experience, a condition, or people, forces you, it's yours. And again, we've talked about once it's yours, once you own it, once it's associated with your identity, then you're going to try and make the best of the situation. You can talk about freedom of choice here. People assume that they will actually feel better if they have choice. But in reality, quite often, we're better off not having a choice. We'll feel better in the long run when we don't have a choice. Totally counterintuitive. Everybody thinks that they want the choice. An experiment that they talk about in the book here is kids who take a photography course at the end are given a chance to select one photograph to take home. One group is told you're going to select it and it's yours, you're going to keep it. Another group is told you're going to select it, and if a week later you want to swap it out, you can swap it out. And they find, when they ask them how happy they are with their photographs in the long run, the group that was not given the choice as to swapping it out was much happier with the photograph they got. The group that was given a choice about whether or not they wanted to swap it out was actually less satisfied and less happy with the photograph that they got, because their PIS hadn't kicked in, because they knew they had the choice of switching it out, so they could be critical of it and not have to make the best of it. And then again, the predictions are wrong. If you say to people, which photography course would you want to take? The one where you're given no choice to swap it out at the end, or the one where you're given the choice to swap it out? And everybody says, of course I want the chance to swap it out. Duh. And of course, they're wrong. That's the one in which they'd be less happy with their photograph. So the last bit I'm going to talk about is about explanation, and it goes back to a theme I think you've been noticing. Anything that you can explain. So when we talk about things that are inescapable, or things that are actions versus inactions, or human negligence versus bad luck, anything that you can explain And it doesn't have to be like the best explanation or an accurate explanation. It just has to be one that you can kind of believe in a little bit. So it has to be plausible, can lower the intensity and the duration of the emotional impact of the experience. And this applies to both negative and positive experiences. And a lack of explanation, so something that stays mysterious or stays unexplained, is going to be more intense for a longer period of time. So if you think about it, this sort of is the essence of the PIS itself. The PIS looks for explanations for things. And when you're talking about negative events, you want to reduce the intensity and duration of those negative experiences, negative emotions. But the opposite really is true of positive experiences. But again, we wouldn't predict that. So if you look at negative events, if we can explain them, they're going to be less bad for less amount of time. So that's bad, right? And that's why your PIS kicks in and you explain them, you come up with reasons and rationalizations, and there you feel a little bit better. And if they left unexplained or you can't find a way to rationalize, they feel bad for a longer period of time. But it's the opposite for positive experiences. So with positive experiences, actually if you're given an explanation, it's not as fun and the joy doesn't last as long. So really, with unexplained positive experiences, you feel good for longer because you can't just explain it away. So one of the experiments that's referenced in the book is, where people in an online chat room anonymously, and they're told that other people like them, and then they're given the choice. You can either find out who the other people are, or they don't find out who the other people are. And once they find out, their happiness goes down, and so they're actually much happier not knowing who it is that likes them. And maybe it's only for a short term. I'm not sure if you want to go through your entire life not knowing who has a positive view of you or not. But random positive events and surprises are much more enjoyable. Think about a surprise party or a gift that's given not at birthday or Christmas, and how just a joy it is, versus maybe you're going to get a gift on Christmas or your birthday. You might even know exactly what it's going to be. It's nice, but not nearly as delightful as something that was more of a surprise. So anything that is unexplained, we have to keep thinking about. And if it's unexplained and we keep thinking about it, that could be bad if it's a negative experience, but it can be good if it's a positive experience. Now again, we fail to recognize this, so we mispredict. You ask people, would you like to be in the chat room experiment and not know who it is that likes you? Everybody says, of course I want to know. And they're wrong. Not knowing would have made them happier, but we almost always would choose certainty over uncertainty if we have the choice. Again, it goes back to freedom of choice versus lack of freedom of choice. Very similar idea. So all of this chapter is really about all the various ways in which we don't understand how our explanations via the PIS will reduce the intensity of negative experiences for us, and how we don't understand how it would actually reduce the intensity of positive experiences for us as well. All this explains why we are so bad at predicting how we're going to feel in the future, both positively and negatively, which is the great thesis of the book, why we are pretty bad at understanding why we'll be happy in the future, or why we won't be, what will or won't make us happy in the future. So add this to the mix. So as usual, you should do the reading, you should get the quotes, ask me questions if you have them, and we'll see you later.